we're a composite of everybody that came before us. You know, I think a lot of times, especially here in the West, people may have a very individualistic perspective of who they actually are, not really giving full credence and honor to the fact that they came from 2 parents and 4 grandparents and 8 great-grandparents and 16 great-great-grandparents and 32 great-great-great-grandparents. And you can keep going back. That ultimately constructs what we know as our family tree. And you are a piece of everyone that came before you. So learning about your ancestors and your legacy is really a self-knowledge, fact-finding mission for you to discover aspects of who you actually are.
You're listening to the
New York Said podcast.
Fear not, my friends. This will be my greatest performance.
Give it to me.
Here we go. We came, we saw, we kicked its ass.
Let's get started. Saladin.
Yeah.
Where are we? Not so much like where we are in the building, but where we are in a location, a destination in a world. Where are we?
Wow, we're in what was formerly designated as one of the 7th world wonders, Niagara Falls, New York. It's a lot of rich history here. A lot of times when people think about Niagara Falls, they just think about the falls. They don't really think that there's actual communities that exist here.
And that's what prompted me to say, I really want to have a conversation with you because I heard you like breaking down the Underground Railroad in a way that I'd never heard before. I've been to Niagara Falls and Buffalo for years, had no idea, like oblivious. And so I was like, I know, if I don't know, I'm sure there's somebody else out there that has no idea to the history of Niagara Falls. And can you kind of give us an idea of that?
Yeah, well, to speak to that point, that history was literally buried. And that's something that you see that's consistent in a lot of places just in terms of history itself. It's his story. And because it's his story, it's not the story. And you're always going to find those various different missing elements that may be significant to some communities that to others, hey, it really may not be as significant to them. When you think about Niagara Falls, historically, it's a border town. And in relationship to the Underground Railroad, when freedom seekers are traveling from the South and through the Midwest, this is literally the precipice or the last stop before people are able to cross over to the Canadian side. Other border towns like Detroit, Buffalo, New York, all of us have that significant history in terms of Underground Railroad heritage here. So we are thankful to be able to not only have that heritage, but also to control that narrative, to share it with the public.
And I'll just tell you, just as probably as like a personal bias, like whenever I think about the migration from south to north, I'm like, everybody just went to Harlem. Like, it just started right there. It's like, and it's just like, I mean, that might just be a New York City arrogance. Can you explain like how far it goes in even folding in Harriet Tubman?
First of all, when people even think about Harriet Tubman, most people just think, oh, she went up north. But it's like, okay, where did she cross? When did she cross? When she did cross, what met her on the side of the Canadian border? And we share those actual stories. You know, there were many, many, many communities of our people that settled on the Canadian side. And I'm talking about right across on the Niagara frontier in terms of Canada, Niagara on the Lake, Fort Erie, Mississauga, Toronto, St. Catharines, and going all the way up as far as Nova Scotia. We have communities of our people that to this day, we have ascendants, and I don't say descendants, but I'm saying ascendants, meaning that we rise from the legacy of our ancestors. We have many of our people who are still over there on the Canadian side to this day.
Can you think about your family and Josiah specifically?
Yeah, so my 3rd great grandfather is Josiah Henson. He was the central figure that was used in the famous 19th century novel Uncle Tom's Cabin that was written by Harriet Beecher Stowe. That was a best-selling novel of the 19th century.
I read somewhere that it inspired Abraham Lincoln in some way.
Oh, yeah. He actually checked the copy of Uncle Tom's Cabin out of the Library of Congress weeks before he actually drafted the Emancipation Proclamation. So he was inspired. Folklore says that when he eventually met Harriet Beecher Stowe, he smiled and said, so you're the woman that started this war in this country, right? Because that book actually put on Front Street what was literally happened throughout the system of slavery. And a lot of Southerners didn't like that. And they went through a process of striving to discredit her in many ways as possible. So when you talk about Josiah Henson being a pioneer of the Underground Railroad, as well as a central figure in that book, one of the reasons that there is a negative connotation and this caricature of what a so-called Uncle Tom is to discredit who Josiah actually was.
Okay.
He was a revolutionary. He was the same type of revolutionary as a Nat Turner, but he did it in a various different way.
Can you go a little bit further with this Uncle Tom?
It's the same propaganda with the phrase Uncle Tom that's used to disconnect us from the continent of Africa, where you have these negative images and these negative ideas of what Africa actually is, so that people want to completely disassociate it from that. But if you really knew about what that continent represents, we are the fathers and mothers of civilization. We're the first people to actually invent monotheism, the first people to invent science and mathematics and writing and all of these various different aspects of life. But if you're disconnected or disassociated from it, you won't explore that at all.
Or even made to feel uncomfortable for knowing it. Because my father used to tell me, like, it's a big difference between knowing something and believing something.
Yeah, absolutely. I can believe I'm Denzel Washington right now, but when I go check my bank account, I know for a fact
Just look in the mirror.
that I ain't Denzel Washington.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So there was a propaganda campaign with being able to discredit Harriet Beecher Stowe as well as the central character, Josiah Henson. He led the rebellion, black militia during the rebellion of 1837. That ain't something an Uncle Tom would do. He built the British American Institute. That is not something an Uncle Tom would do. He was responsible for establishing an entire community known as the Dawn Settlement, where over 150 people settled. Uncle Toms don't do work like that. So by a person disassociating themselves from this figure in real life, they also don't have access to his contributions, his intelligence, his ingenuity, and all of those qualities that we can use as guides in order for us to reach our goals in life. So you oftentimes see that same type of propaganda campaign with a lot of our people, and it really requires us to be critical thinkers in order to move past a lot of the propaganda to think like, well, let me look at this and see why people are striving to discourage us from learning about these particular people or even these events in history or places, because there may be something underneath there that I need to know.
Can you talk about the work that you're doing at the Niagara Falls Underground Railroad Heritage Center? Like, what's your title? How'd you get there? Just give me that.
So because of my ancestry and, to speak back to that, Josiah Henson crossed in a place known as Broderick Park on October 28th, 1830 with his family. He had 4 small children at that time. 2 of them were so small he had to carry them in a knapsack on his back, and that journey with his family was 41 days. Once he crossed over to the Canadian side, he lived in a place known as Little Africa for several years, and then eventually moved north where he founded the Dawn Settlement. 3 generations later, my grandmother, Inez Dorsey, was born through his family in St. Catharines, which is an area known as Colored Village. And she moved over into the United States in 1925. So I grew up knowing this part of my ancestry. I didn't have a real sense of value for it as a youth. But as I got older, I began to understand the true value of it. The process of establishing the Niagara Falls Underground Railroad Heritage Center took over a decade. You had to do a lot of historical research. We actually had to save the building, which was a customs house of the 1860s, which was on the 7 sites to save in New York State. Convert that into a historic landmark, connect with a production company who were able to share our vision in the way in which we wanted to build this experiential museum. And this is a company out of Colorado called Studio Tectonics. We had to organize all of these various different moving parts. Probably about 300 people collectively are responsible for establishing that institution. And I'm just one of those people. My specific role as a director of community engagement is really reflective of the work that I've been doing since I've been in this community and growing up here. Both of my parents were a part of the Black Panthers, so they always had a sense of community building and youth advocacy that I was raised in terms of my family dynamics. So it was natural for me to eventually take up on that role because I'm directly connected to my community here. And one of the things that's also unique about our Heritage Center is that we offer free membership to every citizen in our city. in order to encourage that sense of ownership of this literally being our history. You know, it's one thing to tell people, hey, my door is always open, come visit me anytime.
Right.
As opposed to here, you and every member of your household can come here free at any time.
Here's a key.
Exactly.
Here's an actual key where you can come.
Exactly.
During business hours.
Exactly. You know, so I've worked in the education field for about 20 years. I taught within the school district here. My main focus has been early childhood education. I left the school district a couple years ago to accept a director position at the Underground Railroad Heritage Center.
How did that happen? How did they know that you existed for such a prestigious position?
I was already working at the Heritage Center, so I was one of the people that actually opened the doors.
Okay, I apologize.
Yeah, so I opened the doors there amongst my other team members.
I mean, in the sense of to go from being an educator to go full-time doing this.
Yeah, I've always done various different projects at one time. From teaching in the school district, I was also doing an after-school program.
Okay.
I'm an author, so I've published 23 books. I'm always doing various different things, and I never dedicated that amount of time to do the community engagement aspect of the Heritage Center. But I saw, especially after the pandemic, that it would be best for me to step more into that official capacity to expand a lot of the work that we've already been doing at the Heritage Center. And it's been a perfect fit, because now, instead of me being in the classroom Monday through Friday, 8 hours a day, I have the flexibility and freedom to be able to go into schools and to do various different projects, programs, and initiatives, and still be open to do other different things in partnerships with organizations and institutions, not only here in our city, but also in our region and in the state. And then a lot of times,
documentaries and films, and being tapped to
exactly
be a consultant and a number of other positions.
Exactly. So that freedom has been liberating, in a sense where I'm really able to activate aspects of what I'm able to do unhindered.
Can you talk about the experience when someone walks into the door at the Heritage Center? Just what experience are they going to have all the way to the exit?
Wow. So each experience for a person is unique to them. One of the programs that is our signature program is our Freedom Conversations tours that we offer every day, 11:30 and at 2 p.m. And those tours are based upon meeting our guests where they actually are. So in other words, we don't have a script. We don't take people through our space memorizing facts and dates, and people just go through and nod their head the whole entire way. We have conversations with people, and we show people that we're using this conversation of the Underground Railroad and strategic language to show the connection of present day experiences related to social justice, related to police violence, related to racism, white supremacy, all of these different things that people oftentimes don't even have the comfortability to have in their own household. But we create that type of safe and courageous space for people to come in there and have these type of conversations, and to come to conclusions or to get answers that they may have been seeking, that they may not even have the comfort to ask their parents or to talk to with their children. We create a space like that, and each person's experience is unique unto them. Another thing that is also something that people oftentimes don't expect is to come and give of themselves. Usually they come into our space and they think, okay, I'm just coming to learn about the Underground Railroad. But through going through the space and having conversations, they may start sharing that they've done some genealogy research on their family, and they realized in their mid age that the last name that they've been carrying all of these years was never really their last name. Their family changed it when they came here from Ireland because they were business owners, and they knew that if they did not change their last name, that they would not be supported by the overall community. So they did that in order to assimilate, and they never conveyed that information to their next generation. And the next generation didn't convey it to the next generation. And they only found this out doing genealogy research. And I'm sure that they may have not come to the space thinking to have that type of conversation.
Right.
But we create the environment where we can share. Now, this may be a group of 10 people. One person from Boise, Idaho, somebody else from California, somebody else from Mississippi, and you are in an environment with people and experiencing this in real time. to grow from these type of conversations, and people leave feeling a sense of empowerment, inspiration, as well as education. And that's the type of experience that we create.
And can you talk about the importance of genealogy, ancestry, and legacy?
We're a composite of everybody that came before us. I think a lot of times, especially here in the West, people may have a very individualistic perspective of who they actually are, not really giving full credence and honor to the fact that they came from 2 parents and 4 grandparents and 8 great-grandparents and 16 great-great-grandparents and 32 great-great-great-grandparents. And you can keep going back. That ultimately constructs what we know as our family tree. And you are a piece of everyone that came before you. So learning about your ancestors and your legacy is really a self-knowledge, fact-finding mission for you to discover aspects of who you actually are, some of your tendencies, some of your inclinations. Even if there's certain things that are in your health history of your family, you may find out, I may need to change up certain dietary habits that I have because some of my ancestors fell victim to certain type of things. Something as just simple as that, So you really get an opportunity to explore your reference library in life. And I tell people all of the time, each year that you've been on this planet is symbolic to a book in your reference library of life. My great grandmother, she passed from this planet 106 years old. So that's 106 books in her reference library of life. So being around her, I was able to learn a lot just about her life experiences, the way that she sees things, and all of that. So I have some of her books. But if I never took the opportunity to talk to her, to learn from her, I don't have access to that reference library of life. And it's important in terms of not only being able to navigate this world, but also to be able to meet challenges and obstacles and to overcome certain things, because you literally know for a fact that some of your ancestors have been able to overcome certain challenges and obstacles. So you know that you have the capacity. But if you don't have those books, what are you referencing? And if you're sitting there looking at social media all day or reading the newspaper, you may feel as if you don't have the capacity to do anything with so much negativity that you constantly see being promoted to people through propaganda. It really requires a lot, I would say, in terms of making sure that we're connecting with our family. And when I say ancestors and our people, I'm not talking about in the abstract. I'm talking about people that are visiting you and you are visiting for family reunions or for birthdays or other different holidays. Elders that are right around you right now, to be able to connect with that living history right now. That's important.
And can you go into the work that you recently have done at the UN?
A couple of years ago, I had the honor of working on a project that was executive produced and starring Samuel L. Jackson called Enslaved. And it was the first 6-part docuseries that chronicled marine archaeologists examining the remnants of ships associated with the transatlantic trade of enslaved people. So each one of those episodes follows a team of scuba divers who are examining the remnants of these ships along the coast of America, in the UK, Africa, and looking and finding artifacts and the stories that are connected to these ships. I'm in episode 5 about resistance movements, specifically about the Underground Railroad, and I had an opportunity to go to Lake Michigan off of the coast of Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and to film there the actual experience of seeing these scuba divers examine the remnants of ships that are associated with the Underground Railroad. Through that docuseries was screened at the United Nations in order to inform the world about this journey and this experience, and it was connected to the second session of the people of African descent. From there, that was my entrance into the United Nations. Okay. I was able to be on a panel discussion and talk about the Underground Railroad, talk about my family's history, working on these projects. And from there, I've had an opportunity to be on another panel discussion with the United Nations, as well as to be featured in a UN story, talking about the work that I actually do as an educator and also working through the Niagara Falls Underground Railroad Heritage Center.
When they were working on that documentary, weren't you under the impression that they were going to film here and then you realize wait a minute, I got to leave the state? How did you prepare and pivot knowing that you had the assumption that it was going to happen here, but it ended up you had to be ready for what was to come in another state?
It was my first education of how production works.
Okay, gotcha.
You know what I'm saying? And that you don't have time to be ready and to practice. You have to be ready.
Right.
You know?
What's that saying? Like, stay ready, so you don't have to get ready.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Exactly. So I was under the impression initially that the ship called the Home that they were researching docked in Lake Erie here in Western New York. But then they realized that that wasn't accurate, and the ship was actually in Lake Michigan off the coast of Sheboygan, Wisconsin. So I was all, and this is a week before filming.
Right.
I'm all ready to, for the production crew to get there, and I get a phone call like, hey, we're gonna have to fly you out to Michigan. To Wisconsin so we could film there.
Right.
So I'm like, let's go.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? I'm ready. At the time I was teaching pre-K. So this is towards the end of the school year, and every day I'm practicing with my pre-K because we have graduation that's coming up a week later.
Of course, that's how life works. It couldn't come at a more challenging time.
Yeah. So I had to fly out after one of my preschool days. Man, I went straight to the airport after school, got to the airport, reached Milwaukee, Wisconsin late that night. Had to get someone pick me up from Milwaukee to take me to Sheboygan. I probably got in Sheboygan and checked in my room after midnight, and I had to be up by 5:36
for the filming
to meet the production crew, eat breakfast, and then get out on a dive boat. And I've never been on a dive boat before in my life.
A dive boat?
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
but you weren't diving.
No, I had to be out there.
Okay, gotcha. I think I saw an image where you were like in the middle and like people were around you.
Yeah, that's when we was filming. And it's funny because I was seasick when I was filming. I was like, yo, I wonder if they're going to get that on film.
But when they filmed the magic of editing, it looked like you were good.
Yeah. Yo, because when we ate breakfast, I got a chance to meet the crew real quick. We got out on the dive boat. And the dive boat, it was a trip about an hour and a half out into the middle of Lake Michigan.
Yep.
And before we got on the dive boat, some of the crew members was offering me some gum. Like, here, you want this gum? You might get a little seasick. And I'm thinking they trying to prank me.
Okay.
So I'm like, nah, I'm good. And they like, oh, you for real? You want it? So I'm like, nah, I'm good. Yo, I start getting out and I'm looking at them waves, and my stomach start feeling like a roller coaster. And I'm like, oh my God, I feel sick.
I know that feeling.
Soon as I start thinking like, yo, I got to find a bathroom or something because I feel sick.
Yeah.
The director's like, okay, we're getting ready to start filming. I'm like, oh my God, I hope I don't throw up on camera. You know what I'm saying?
So did you just suppress it and just focus on the conversation?
I had to show and prove.
Okay.
So we go up on top of the dive boat, and he lets us know, okay, this is basically the scene. Let's go. And I just start recording, speaking from my heart. You know what I'm saying? And that really, really taught me something, that experience, in terms that you have to be ready. You don't have time to prepare and to practice. You have to live this. And in living this, you automatically open opportunities and doors. I mean, this is one reason why we're sitting down together right now.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like taking advantage of these type of opportunities to be able to share these moments and being present. And this can only happen if you are always ready.
Yeah.
From there, I had a chance to film an IMAX film narrated by Morgan Freeman. And
was that Into the Wild?
Yeah, Into America's
Into
Wild.
America, yes.
Same thing. Had to be ready.
Can you talk about your introduction to the 5% Nation, the science behind it?
Yeah.
And even like my good friend Juan, he's studying,
Word. Yeah. I can build on that.
Before you do that, but just like tell us the introduction, because I see it on your T-shirts. I see it.
Yeah.
And so I remember the first time I grew up in the 90s, and so all my OGs were named Albar and Wisdom and Knowledge, and then the first time I was like, what's going on? I saw Manifest and Guru, Gangstar. He had a big Circle 7, and it's always been around. I mean, of course, Wu-Tang Clan and going on, but I mean, it's deeper than music industry and entertainment and that kind of thing. So, talking to someone who lives it, breathes it, I see it. Can you just break it down?
Yeah. So one thing I would say is, if you're talking about exposure to just cultural ideas, when you go back to the golden era of hip hop, that was a time period where there was a lot of the music that was coming out that was culturally centric. We are the children of the Black Power and the Civil Rights Movement. So we grew up in environments where not only are we seeing and hearing our parents who are striving to fight for justice and freedom and equality and all of those things, we're also seeing evidence that in our house as well. And the music is reflecting that, speaking about consciousness and all the things in terms of
X-Clan and Poor Righteous Teachers and
so in that environment, you have no choice but to be exposed because this is your background music to life, right?
The soundtrack,
And being the children of the Black Power and the Civil Rights Movement, there naturally was a sense of pride that came along with that. And the music that we started to create exhibited that sense of pride. The 5% is really a cultural movement that was born out of the Nation of Islam. So when you think about the Nation of Islam that was started in the early 1930s, there were many people who were exposed and influenced by the Nation of Islam. Some people remained members of the Nation of Islam. You think about people like Muhammad Ali, his sense of pride and his sense of confidence. He was exposed to that sense of consciousness through the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. You think about the founder of Yahweh's movement. You think about Shaka Khan.
Shaka Khan,
You know, who was exposed. There was no way around.
and Noble Drew Ali and the Moorish Science Temple.
You had people who were part of that movement that were also exposed to the teachings of Islam that we got here in the Western Hemisphere. So you had some people that stuck with that religious movement, and you had other people that broke away from that religious movement and started their own movements. You know, Allah, who was considered the father of the 5% nation, he was once a member of the Nation of Islam. But at one time, he realized that this movement was not youth oriented. These throwaways who, you know, were children within Harlem were not even hearing or learning about this aspect of civilization and higher education. So he wanted to focus specifically on the youth. But in order to do that, he had to drop a lot of the religious baggage that came along with being a member of the Nation of Islam. So when he did that, the first members that he started to teach of the 5% were children who were also a part of gang warring at that time period, which were also members of the budding hip hop scene that started to come into existence. So a lot of the early youth that you see that are part of hip hop were also members of the 5%. So when I say 5%, I'm talking about a small percentage of people who are classified as critical thinkers, who view the world in terms of a sense of God-centeredness, that God is not just this entity outside of myself or something that is far away from me, but I should strive to personify that divine intelligence in any and everything that I do. Whether I'm treating a person with respect and honor, or whether I'm making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I'm going to strive to do my best because that is what is expected of me, being really the image and the likeness of God. And you can see this in all religions, whether you're studying Islam, whether you're studying Christianity, where it teaches you about being made in the image and the likeness of God. You have some Christians that really aspire to be God-like or to be like Jesus, which is no different than the type of perspective that a 5%er would have. I strive to be God-like in all of the things that I do. Our women who are a part of this nation aspire to be likened to the earth. Because when you study indigenous societies also teach that the woman is the twin of the earth. And we should respect our women just like we respect the earth, because she is the home and the birthplace of humanity. So these type of perspectives is something that's not new. It has just been organized in a certain way to reach youth within urban environments, starting in Harlem, New York, and then all throughout not only the United States, but also people who identify with this sense of consciousness in other countries to this day. So I got exposed to that way of thinking through my enlightener when I was in college at Central State University.
In Wilberforce,
Yes.
Ohio.
Yep, in Wilberforce, Ohio. Now, the beautiful thing about that is my parents were a part of the Panthers, so they already raised me with a sense of consciousness of who we were as a people. So this was kind of like an evolution in terms of thinking in terms of the highest aspect of who I actually am. Some people, they aspire to be a doctor, and that's cool if that's the highest expression that they want to aspire to. Some people, they just want to aspire to be a man or a husband or whatever. I say we should strive to aspire to what we say we worship. Aspire to be God-like in what we do. Because I think if more people had that true sense of aspiration, this world would look entirely different, because you would treat people like you so-called treat and worship your own creator. You would treat people with respect, and nature. So being exposed to that type of cultural worldview in college, I had an opportunity to learn a lot more. And from there, I evolved to the point of being, one of the most recognizable members of the 5% Nation to this day, to the point that when I got exposed to some of these cultural teachings through some of the music I was listening to, like the Poor Righteous Teachers and Brand Nubian, Rakim, and all of these artists.
Brand Nubian, one of their songs is a straight up lesson.
Yes. Yeah. So as I got older, it's crazy because now these brothers are like my peers in this culture, where they've reached out to me and we've had conversations about me giving them insight into various different aspects of our teachings that, it came full circle. It's almost surreal sometimes. And I think about, man, y'all are the ones that inspired me to want to learn more about myself and my people. And now you all see the value in what I offer as being a representative of our nation with a lot of the various different things that I do.
Not to keep going back to entertainment, but there's a scene in the Wu-Tang television show where like one of the brothers was kind of like fronting, but he was acting like he was down.
Yeah.
And they needed to test him. And they needed to know his mathematics. He needed to know is that a real thing?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. If I'm walking through the airport and somebody sees me, they, if I'm not late for my flight, I'm obligated to respond to somebody if somebody's asking me, how do you see today's mathematics? And basically that is a question which represents an opportunity to share your life experience with somebody. So for example, today is the 25th.
Yes.
And in mathematics, 2 is wisdom, 5 is power. So if you were to come to me and say, how you see today's mathematics, I would build with you or explain to you my perspective of what wisdom power is. So what it does is it actually ensures that our relationships with one another is not a liability, but it's always an asset. So that we're not just sitting around talking about the weather or who won the football game last night. We're having conversation that is of value, so that, it's no different than having a scientific community. You bring your research to your brothers or your sisters, and this is what I've experienced. I want to share this with you. Can you share something with me? And that type of exchange is called building. And that is just part of the ways in which we interact with each other.
How much of that is the science and how much of it is personal? Like, you may be having a bad day. Will that influence your answer when you're pressed that way?
It could, but because it is a common standard between us, that should be used as the point of reference in terms of how you articulate how you're experiencing your day. And the beautiful thing about it is there are specific words that are used that have a specific vibration or a certain meaning to it. So for example, we use the word knowledge a lot. We use the word wisdom a lot. Some people, they may have, last time they heard the word wisdom was 15 years ago. But that's something that is a common part of our language and how we communicate.
Oh, when they speak to the significant, they would say, that's my my wisdom.
Yep, or my earth, my queen, not my bee.
Right.
Or using that type of lower language because it doesn't really honor your divinity. So our language is divine. It's divine speech. So it's hard to be negative and to dwell within that type of space when you're using a language that elevates you.
Can you give us the supreme mathematics before we skate? I just got one more question after you give it to us. So I'll take it here. Today is the 25th. 2 represents wisdom, 5 represents power. If I'm speaking to somebody and they're asking me, how do you see today's mathematics? One of the things that I may say is there is wisdom in power. Now, how is there wisdom in power? Wisdom represents right discernment or right judgment. When you think about power, oftentimes when you're looking at your community or your municipality, you see power dynamics, or you see the way in which resources determine who has what and who does not have what. Wisdom or right discernment allows you to be able to see where these power dynamics lie.
how to access certain resources and how to work with others in terms of strategic partnerships to ensure that there is a form of equity within your community or within your municipality. But if you don't have the wisdom or you don't have the ability to rightly discern where the power dynamics are, you're usually going to be on the wrong side of that. If you're not at the table, that's because you're probably on the menu. And sometimes people remain on the menu because they don't have the wisdom to be able to recognize the power dynamics of what's going on around them. In terms of today's mathematics, I may be sharing that with somebody to show them, hey, you may want to take a second look at the way things are moving within your city, within your community, and how you need to best position yourself to have access to power. But in order to do that, you have to do things in a wise way. You have to rightly discern what to say, who to talk to, who not to talk to, what not to say. But these are things that you learn through observation.
Throughout your entire life, these various combinations, you're constantly learning and building on, to say 25. Your answer for 25 may not have been the same answer last month, last year, 5 years ago.
Exactly.
And so your discernment is refined because you're constantly in practice every single day.
Exactly. So yeah, you're building right now. That's exactly.
Okay. It's making you're very, very, very poetic and eloquent. And that's why I got that from you, just listening to you, kind of like, even though we were working, I was still ear hustling, I was paying attention. So beyond the work that we were doing, I was like, there's more here. And I would love just to have a conversation. And I'm grateful that you had the time to just build today.
Yeah, so let me tell you this as well. So we also have a supreme alphabet. So each letter of our alphabet is symbolic to a certain word, which gives us greater insight into these words where I told you we have divine speech and divine language. So the 25th letter in our alphabet is Y. And we say that the letter Y is equal to the question why. So there is wisdom and power in asking the question why. Because when you look at the word question, the root word of question is quest. So whenever a person asks the question why, it sends you on a quest to find out a person's intention or the reasoning behind why something was said or did, or why something wasn't said or did.
Because that's even just as important, because someone could not give you the answer and your quest could go on for 10 years, but they could have ended it by telling you what you needed to know.
Exactly.
And sometimes it's a strategy to just hold you back. Similar to the propaganda that you were saying earlier in this conversation, where like it's best if you not know that because I can continue to usher you and control you as I see fit.
Exactly. So you can see in that scenario, especially, why a person would want to maintain that wisdom, because it's connected to a certain power that they don't want you to have access to. You know?
Understood.
So this type of thinking is really a way of critically examining life and being a scientist of life. And as a culture, we don't have a hierarchy. There's no one above me or no one below me. We are all equal. And this is a culture that the entire human family can live. So it's not just because you're a black person, you're a brown person, you're BIPOC, that you can have this critical way of looking at the world. This is something that's beneficial to everybody, to think critically like this.
Everything you said was ultra positive. Why is something so beautiful sometimes deemed so negative?
Because sometimes you do have people who do negative things in the name of what that is.
Okay.
You know, if you have somebody that's a Christian and they go bomb somebody like Timothy McVeigh did, some people will sit there and say, well, that is a reflection of Christianity. Or if you see a Muslim that go and does something, some people will sit there and say, well, that is what Islam is. And people have a tendency to attach personal acts or deeds to certain type of religions or cultures or metaphysical worldviews. And unfortunately, you have a media that makes itself notable and important and monetizes these narratives based upon the most dramatic and violent things that they can actually share.
Yeah.
And that gets more traction than a person planting flowers.
Yes. Absolutely. Like they say,
You know?
if it bleeds, it leads.
Wow.
And then the last question I have for you is, out of everything you've done, out of everything you've experienced, what you've learned, what has been the most important lesson you've learned on your journey so far? Kind of a big question, but it's something that I ask every guest.
Today, I would say the absence of something is your evidence of opportunity. And a lot of times when people see that something isn't there, or they see that something needs to be done, they don't realize that that itself is your evidence to do something about it. And I think a lot of times people are apathetic because they may not truly understand their infinite potential and divine essence to do something about changing the circumstances that are around them, because it's really a reflection of what's going on within them. So I always strive to empower people to show them that you have that type of capacity to do something, and I demonstrate that through the things that I actually do.
Let's end it right there. I can't tell you how grateful and appreciative of your time I am. If it looked like I was like zoned out every now and again, it's because you would say something that would send my mind off. And I'd have to come back and be like, oh, I'm having a conversation because you sent me off in a process where I'm like, oh, that's ill. This was fantastic. This is one of those episodes that someone's gonna have to listen over and over and over, because sometimes you think that like, oh, I got it the first
what
listen.
he said.
Yeah, like you got to go back, listen to it more than once. But sincerely, thank you for your time.
Thank you, man.
Is there anything you would like to say before we skate?
No, that if people wanted to learn more, I would say that they can simply Google the Atlanta School for Gifted Youngsters, because I founded an early childhood learning center.
Yes, and I'll put a link on the website.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so if they want to learn more, I would encourage them to do that.
Excellent. We're out of here. Peace.
Peace. Yeah, this is excellent, man. I appreciate this.